Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the Planning Board meeting of April 18th, 2023. The first order of business is for me to introduce the Planning Board members. So I'll do that. Starting at my extreme left is Vaughn Dugan. Sitting next to Vaughn is Steve Webster, who is a new alternate. Next to Steve is Roger Murray, and Doug Braskin is the vice chairman of the planning board. To my right, John Thurston and Brad Harriman, who is a representative from the Board of Selectmen, and Julie Jacobs, another alternate. Julie, would you be willing to sit in for Peter Goodwin tonight?
Sure.
Okay. So this is the first meeting where we were supposed to have 3 alternates. We just have 2 right now. But just to remind the alternates, you can participate in any discussion that takes place with the planning board. But then when we go to vote, you cannot vote unless I've designated you to sit in for another planning board member. Okay? So. But like in this case, Julie is going to be the alternate. And
since there's more than one of us now, do we alternate in between things during the evening as well?
I was just going to explain that. Yes. So I'm having Julie sit for Peter Goodwin, and then after that, then we will rotate and go to you, Steve, and then Jane, and then back to Julie. Okay? This would be in the future. Okay, so I will alert you if I think somebody is going to not be here. Go ahead, Vaughn.
I think the stipulation is that if, let's say tonight, Julie sits on something that is continued, she has to continue to sit on that.
Yes, that's right. Okay, there are no public hearings tonight, so this is a night basically for discussion items. And the first discussion item is the Hunt Lot merger. This is Carol Hunt at 25 Lakeview Drive, tax map 188-04 and 18805. The 18804 has a single-family home on it, and the other lot is a vacant lot. The proposal is to merge these lots, and this is in the residential district. Tavis, did you want to say something about this?
The only thing I have to mention on this is brought out in the review with regard to frontage and acreage. There's no problem. The lot that is created would be in compliance with the regulations. And I do have some recommended conditions if the board wants to hear those.
Okay, did you have some conditions that?
Conditions is the applicant needs to submit a copy of the deeds prior to recording those, and the applicant's responsible for paying the recording fees for the notice of merger and for the deeds.
Okay, thank you. Okay, board members, any questions?
Yes, is there a mortgage on the property?
I don't know. Did you want to ask Tavis that?
A mortgage on the property?
There's a stipulation in the statute that says that if there's a mortgage on the property, the mortgagee needs to or the applicant needs to notify the company that holds the mortgage, and the planning board is supposed to be made so aware and put a condition on the merger that the mortgage company be involved in said merger. My general opinion is the fact the statute requires the applicant to tell us if there is a mortgage and there isn't one, then the planning board is somewhat safe in assuming there isn't. However, I think the statute still obligates the property owner to decree whether there is or is not a mortgage, and coordinate with the mortgage company prior to doing that. The planning board wants to add an additional condition. You could require compliance with 674-39A, paragraph 2.
Okay.
And the consent of the mortgage company needs to be recorded with the notice
Okay.
And I have a second question. It says, submit copies of draft deeds. There are copies of the deeds attached to the application. In terms of a deed going forward, there's no requirement in the application, nor is there a requirement in the statute that a draft deed be submitted. And it seems to me that would be an unnecessary expense on behalf of the applicant.
In order to merge the properties, a new deed description has to be written. The assessing office for the town has requested that draft copies come forward because the town has a long history of using the recorded map, recording, when somebody does the merger and records a map showing a new lot, the assessing office often merges the lots even though the deeds haven't transferred. So about a year ago, the planning board started requesting copies of the deeds in advance so that there would be a deed supporting the map that went to the county deeds office.
But there is a notice of merger recorded in the registry of deeds, which puts everybody on notice that the lots are merged and causes the merger of the lots. And basically,
that's also my understanding, but this is something the assessing department has asked for.
So I understand the assessing department's request. Roger, with your concern about the unnecessary cost, I see it says draft deeds. Would there be an expense for that?
I haven't done a deed lately, but it's probably $150, $175, $200 to hire an attorney to draft a deed. And the deed is essentially worthless. If you sell a lot, maybe you'll get the same attorney, but you may get a different attorney to prepare the deed, and it really serves no useful purpose.
Any other
And where I've done these in the past for clients, we never had to supply a draft deed in Wolfeboro or other towns.
Any other comments?
I would like to make one comment. Although the homeowner has the right to do what they want to do, it does sadden me again to see another lot go to an adjustment and be attached to another property, because every lot we lose, that means a home can't be built on that lot. And that's the only thing that bothers me a little bit about the process, but they're right.
Okay. No other comments? Okay, Roger has suggested adding a condition to the conditions that Tavis has already mentioned. Anyone have any problem with that?
Not me.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the merger of 25 Lakeview Drive, tax map 188-04 and 188-045, with the conditions mentioned in the additional condition?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you.
Seconded.
Okay.
Davis?
Yeah,
What
go
are
ahead.
the conditions?
As-
Because Roger spoke to two things. Does the board want the draft deed or not? Because the original so hearing what the board has talked about, I see that the conditions of approval, the applicant responsible for recording fees for notice of merger, and the applicant shall be responsible for compliance with 674-39A, paragraph 2. Is that-
My motion was intended to include both of the conditions that you had suggested, Tavis, as well as Roger's. As
The
the
original,
third.
okay. I just wanted to get,
Okay, so Doug made the motion, Vaughn seconded it. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
I'll oppose on the basis that the draft deed should not be required.
Okay, so that you're voting in opposition, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Okay, the next item is the Klein lot merger. This is Richard Klein, a merger of lot 204-002, 97 Bay Street, and 204-003, 101 Bay Street. Both of these are vacant lots in the Bay Street Limited Business District. Okay, Tavis, do you have anything to add?
So both of these properties actually had a single-family home on them until a couple of years ago. The permits have been issued and the buildings have been removed. Functionally, the same request as the last one. In this case, each of the lots are about an acre with 90 or so feet of frontage. The current zoning requires 1 acre per lot and 150 feet of frontage, so the resultant lot will be in conformance with today's standards. Same recommended conditions as the last one. Anticipating the same. Staff is okay with or without copies of the draft deeds. Applicant responsible for the notice of merger. And then again, if the board wants to add the 674-39A2 condition, staff has no objection.
Okay. Comments or questions? Roger, do you want that same condition?
Yeah, I think if you follow the statute, literally, it would be a conditional approval pending a determination of whether there, or the applicant providing information on whether there is a mortgage on the property, and if there is a mortgage, that the consent of the mortgagee be provided the town and recorded with the notice of merger.
Okay, any other questions or comments? And go ahead.
So just to further Roger's point,
Yep.
looking in the statute, it says that if there is any mortgage on any of the lots, the applicant shall give written notice to each mortgage holder at the time of submission of the application. So the application has been submitted, but we don't have confirmation that they've either have a mortgage or don't have a mortgage, or if they have a mortgage, that they've given that written notice. So I guess to further Roger's point, can we proceed with this if we don't have that confirmation?
I think you can, because the condition will ultimately be worded in such that the applicant needs to demonstrate that there is or is not a mortgage, and/or that the mortgagor or mortgagee has been notified and assents to the merger.
Very good, thank you.
Okay.
I think you can make a condition of approval, but the notice probably should not be signed until the question is resolved. And if there is a mortgage, then you would need a consent of the mortgagee to be recorded with the notice.
Okay. All right, any other comments? Does somebody want to approve this lot of 97 Bay Street and 101 Bay Street to merge?
So I will again make a motion to approve it with the 2 conditions that Tavis had mentioned, as well as the third with regard to the mortgagee notification that Roger has mentioned.
Okay, someone want to second? Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll be consistent and vote opposed.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks. Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is the work plan.
So what I did here is I took exactly the same work plan that the board had last voted on.
Yeah, okay.
For the purposes of discussion, what I did was take and strike through all of those things that would be quote-unquote warrant article type decisions and move them down and called them potential warrant articles. I took the numbers away so that people wouldn't get concerned about what was listed before or assuming higher priority of anything else, so everything's just a bullet point. So at the top is general work topics, such as the CIP, water, sewer, road standards, et cetera. And then down at the bottom are the list of things that could be potential warrant articles in 2024 moving forward. And without going into detail, the last bullet point there is the 2023 warrant articles. So this is what I heard the board ask for at the last meeting. If you want further revisions,
Okay, well,
the floor is
yeah,
yours.
I'd like to kind of get them into priority order. and see if anybody has any other item that they want to add or take off, so that we can get going on some of these items.
Yeah, I would suggest in addition to putting them in priority order, we could perhaps also classify them with regard to how long we expect it's going to take to discuss them. Some of them may be quick, some of them may be longer.
Right.
And perhaps we can use the quick ones as fill-in agenda items for those sessions where we have few public hearings.
Okay. Okay, so somebody want to start? Vaughn, do you want to get started on prioritizing or giving your thoughts?
Obviously, we need to focus on master plan priorities, always and ongoing.
Yes, and that's on the general work topic. And Peter will be providing us with a final report when he gets back.
Peter did or will?
Peter
Did.
Goodwin, so.
Will be.
Will be, okay. STR, I think we should still talk about getting that definition to a warrant article, because I guess there was some discussion about whether or not we actually wanted to eliminate future STRs, because that was one consequence that people were interestingly complaining about. It's complicated to prioritize. It's like posting a sign in your front yard that says, I'm for green energy, but basically voting against anything that has to do with the solar panel that you might look at, or a wind turbine. It's hard to know what the direction and what the priorities of the community are in this vague state. So I'm in a conundrum.
Okay, at the last meeting, I think you brought up the issue of the fact that we are the planning board and we should be planning on priorities. And did you have any further thoughts on that?
I agree with you. I think we can make plans. Who knows if we will be successful in implementing them. So I still think we should work according to the master plan and according to every survey that we have that says what the voters want. Whether or not these things get approved, I guess we can put them up there every year and see. So.
Okay.
Well, one recommendation might be to look at zoning changes that are responsive to state mandates or state statutory changes. So one of the warrant articles that failed was the requirement of every density bonus that is availed to elderly housing by statute now has to be availed to all housing types, particularly workforce and affordable housing, if that helps the board.
Okay, anybody else have any thoughts on that?
On what Tavis just said?
Well, on the housing issue that Vaughn just brought up.
Well, we definitely, again, we have to keep our eyes out for what's going on in the rest of our state and what the other communities are coming up with clarity that we can use for examples. I think I said that last time to Tavis. We'd like to see what examples are out there, so when he sees something coming from a community that's all clarified, then we should be able to look at that and see if we want to get going on it. But we're still shooting dots at the dartboard like we were before, unless we have some real substance in front of us that we can say this is what we want for our community. I mean, we're not professionals to write this stuff up. We rely on professionals to write it up so that we can follow the example. I mean, that's what we...
That's partially true, but
Yeah.
right
well,
now the regulations have a lot of elderly bonuses that don't apply to any other housing type. And the
okay.
statute says that needs to be addressed.
Okay, can he finish?
So to me, I'd like to see the professional, and if that's the way the board wants to go, we need to see that professional document put in front of us so that we can look at it and then we can craft a little bit of it. That's probably a real priority. But again, the real priority is, again, our stormwater, our number one golden goose that's out there. Every day, we confront it with water quality. There's groups that are out there that are meeting right now that are giving us data and information. We should be working that data in as soon as we can and keeping our stormwater regulations up current. So to me, those are probably the top two.
Okay, well, as far as the stormwater is concerned, we had talked about doing the road standards, and we were going to talk about that at that time, the roadways. And then the shorefront regulations that we've talked about at the Wolfeboro Waters, that they will be coming forward with something as far as I know. Okay, so that's two areas that are stormwater related. As far as the housing is concerned, it seems to me that, if we could just decide one housing issue that we want to focus on, whether it's the accessory apartment issue or dwelling, the ADUs, or the multifamily, whichever one, but I think we've got to spend more time explaining it to people what we're trying to do. As far as the accessory dwelling units is concerned, we could take away we had said that we were going to do any existing accessory building that could be turned into an ADU. That brings up a lot of questions, I think. So, we may want to rethink and see how we can better explain this to the public as to why we think it would be a good idea, especially if we include the, no short-term rental and things of that nature. So, anybody else want to say anything about housing?
Yeah, I'd like to, I think we should be starting to look at an overlay area in our town where we can provide workforce housing and other low-income housing and provide areas that, like Tava says, if we don't do something about it, our state is going to tell us that the applicant that comes in front of us is okay to go ahead and do it, because if we go ahead and deny them, then they're going to go to the Housing Fair Share Appeals Board and they're going to get what they want to get. So I think a housing overlay somewhere is probably going to be our first thing.
Okay, we do have an affordable housing overlay. I mean, that's part of why Harriman Hill is where it is because that was designated in the multifamily dwelling issue. So, we kind of do have that. Maybe we want to formalize it a little bit more, but.
So maybe that needs to be known, because I think the message is out there that we don't have it in our community and we're not providing it, and maybe we need to point that out to our community and say, here's the area that has been allocated.
And do you want it expanded or not?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a question to ask. Anybody else have any?
Yeah,
go ahead.
I feel like I'm a little bit working in a vacuum, not knowing exactly what the public wants. We got a pretty strong message sent to us through this year's election with regard to the warrant articles. So I'd like to get a better idea from the public of what they think is needed, rather than just us deciding on our own without much public input. I would suggest that perhaps we could add a public comment section to every meeting going forward. I see there is one today.
Yeah,
and
put
perhaps
it on recently.
Yes, that's right.
It was dropped.
But if we have that consistently and the public realize there's a forum for them to come and express their concerns, perhaps we'll get some indication from them what they think is needed.
Okay, well, I was kind of speaking to the issue that Vaughn brought up, that housing is an issue. If the rest of the board doesn't agree with that, then that would be good to know.
And perhaps it's wiser to, instead of saying these are all the things together that we would like to do to, let's just use accessory dwelling units, maybe put it into 3 sections so that they can vote on the 3. We put it all in as one lump sum, existing attached ADUs could now just go through the planning board, by right. Then detached ADUs have these criteria. If it's the detached that are the problem, well then, we can explain it individually so that the whole thing doesn't, there's one thing that somebody picks up and complains about, then the whole thing doesn't pass. I think that's a strategy to break it into individual parts.
Okay.
Well, I think if you look at the public hearing, it was probably optimistically 3-1 against the detached ADUs, which tells you how people who attended that hearing thought. I think we do need to look at accessory dwelling units in the shorefront residence district to put us in compliance with the state statute. I'm opposed to any accessory dwelling units attached by habitable space or conditioned space, and I'm probably also opposed to any ADUs except maybe in very limited locations, if the board really wanted to proceed. I think we should address what Tavis brought up, and if our statutes are not, our regulations are not in compliance with state law, then we should look at addressing that.
Opposition to attached by habitable space and what?
By conditioned space.
So you would like to.
But those are the only ADUs that are allowed now.
No, they're attached or within. The proposed amendment had them attached by conditioned space.
They have to be attached by a
They
wall.
have to,
Yeah, but that's not what your amendment said.
No, we were amending beyond
allowing
that.
detached, right?
That's
Yeah.
right, and that's what I'm telling you I am opposed to.
I was just looking for clarification, that's fine.
Okay, is there any reason why we can't have a public meeting and find out what people's thoughts are?
Might as well have a
rather
public
than-
meeting and say, these are the things we're looking at working on.
Yeah,
Where does everybody rank
right.
them?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's a series of easels and people put stickers on them or what have you. I would wager 90% of the people voting really didn't know what they were voting on specifically.
I don't think that's the case. 90% is a pretty high number when you get 900 votes that voted against certain things. So I think your idea of having somebody put a pin on an easel and go around the table, that's probably a good thing to do. Again, you gotta reach out to the community and say, are you interested in this? And if they're more than 50%, then you got to look at it that way. And if it's less than 50%, you got to say they're not interested. So then you got to craft to it.
I'm just feeling a little confused at this point because I thought the whole reason we had this long list of things to do last year was because the public said this is what they wanted us to look at. So now I keep hearing from everybody here that, oh, no, that's not what they really meant. So that's what I
don't think
feel.
anybody's
So
said
we
that.
have had the master plan survey. We have a list of statistics from that.
Right.
And we were basing our work on that. I think that survey system is a more powerful tool. People will come to certain meetings if they've been rabble-roused to look at something in a certain way. And, those are the people who were going to come. So it's not it's not good representation. A broader survey is actually what we want. People who won't show up, for one meeting for one reason, but people who are surveyed for a whole range of things, like the master plan surveys.
Right, and that's sort of what we did with the drive-through restaurants.
Right. But, because we kept getting the same complaint again,
Yeah.
we did put it out again,
Well, and also this next thing here on the potential warrant articles, that thing that says half bath. That's been around for a long time, going around and around and around and around and around. Obviously, some people are very interested in that.
Which one is that?
Half bath.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That seems to be something that interests an awful lot of people. But yet we seem to keep going like this and moving it to the side by saying, oh, no, that's really not all that important. But it seems to be because it keeps coming up to the top.
Okay.
And we've been working on it for years, really.
So the way I'm hearing it here is from the people, they said it wasn't clear enough, okay? So if you write half bath and you clearly define what a half bath is, and then you go back and you define what we really wanted in the garage, which was a toilet, that morphed into a half bath that turned into a tile shower on the second floor. I mean, that's where it went. So if you want to clarify something, then the people actually know what an ADU is. They know what workforce housing is. They know what all these things are. And then when they go to look at the easel and put the star on it, they actually know what they're looking at and they can understand it. And I agree with you, but
That's why we did the definitions this year, too, and had them to vote on. These are the definitions we need to do before we can move on. Because if it's not defined, we don't know what it is.
So we could have what is a short-term rental? We tried that. We can try again. And, what is a half bath? I mean, most people who work in the industry know what that is. It's a toilet and a sink. But apparently, it's not clear and clean. We should say it's a toilet and a sink
Yeah, define it.
until we change it.
Yeah, define it as the appliances rather than use the term half bath.
Right.
If the board believes that's even relevant to what you're trying to regulate.
Yeah.
If it's already clear that you can't have a detached living unit on the property, then simply the existence of a detached living unit on the property is a violation. You don't need to specify half bath or toilet sink or bidet shower or what have you.
Yes. And that was
Which I think was the original origin of putting that into the definition. The town, perhaps without even realizing it, also amended in 2021 the definition of habitable space to say that a half bath on the ground floor did not make habitable space. Well, of course it doesn't, because when you look at building code, bathrooms aren't habitable space. But it was the town's attempt to double down on making sure that someone, for whatever reason, couldn't have a full bath.
And the logic there, I think, is sure you can have an accessory building, let's say a garage that's a workshop, and you want to have a toilet and a sink in there for convenience, dirt, whatever reason, or it's a working space on your property. The thought was that it's not easily enforced if you have the full complement of shower, toilet, sink to, see what's actually happening in that building. I think the problem is.
That was the thought.
I know.
When
I'm
we
just
adopted,
saying.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's why we were at half bath, so that it would work.
I totally get it, but a unit is a bath, living, sleeping, and cooking.
So to the direction, the board is sending the planner direction on this is how we'd like you to view it. So when somebody comes to you and says, this is what I'd like to do, then you say, well, we're calling it a half bath, that's a toilet and a sink, and that's all you can have.
That's basically what's being said, yes.
And right now, it's only on the ground floor, whatever that is.
Whatever that is, yes. This is the world I'm in because of board and voter action, yes.
But
What is the
Well,
ground floor?
That's
What is?
what zoning regulations do. They define it for you so you can
Right now,
enforce
my
it.
point is we don't have a definition of half bath or ground floor. So if we're going to keep it, we need to come up with definitions. So.
I don't really know where half bath ever came from because we never even, I mean, when Kathy and I and Vaughn did the thing down there, we never ever had a half bath discussion.
Right. It is sort of an industry known. Half bath is toilet, sink. Three-quarter bath is with the shower. Full bath has a tub and a shower. Usually, oftentimes one thing, but could be separated.
And those are two very simple things to add. Definition of half bath is blank. The definition of ground floor is blank. That's all it
Okay,
takes.
and Okay, that's what we're trying to get to.
Right.
I mean, I think if we could say simply, there can only be one ground floor on a building, that would, because on a slope you can have 3, let's say, a steep slope. So we could allow, one
Pick one.
somewhere, whichever ground they pick.
Or it could be the lowest floor, but, so we're getting into some detailed discussion about this topic.
yeah.
And I think we're getting away from our original goal, which was to prioritize what we were going to work on.
Well, I just came up with two definitions.
Yeah, I think it's good, though, to have it out there so we can know what we got in front of us, so we can make that determination on how fast we can get this done.
Well, if it's back to me on my priorities, I agree. Certainly, we have to address anything that is already a state statute that is not addressed properly, and we could get a list of those. But otherwise, we'll be in complicated waters if somebody pushes through and appeals our decisions if we're not following state statute.
Right.
But we did know that if the zoning ordinance amendment didn't go through, then we were going to be confronted with this because Tavis had brought this question up, so we should resolve it right away. This is definitely a thing that should be taken care of right away.
So we have a few. We have the,
Okay, you're talking about the
elderly,
accessory.
and we have
Talking about the half bath
Yeah,
thing
the
there, we
half-
should
yes, okay.
square that
Yeah,
away
right,
right
I've got
away.
that down as number 1.
Yeah, very
Right.
good.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any other thoughts?
I think we should add zoning enforcement to the list, and I would be in favor of the stormwater regulations with roads, the shorefront regulations. And I think at some point, probably not immediately, we should look at solar regulations. I think I have a slightly better understanding than at the last meeting, and apparently it's the contract with the electric supplier that the town has limits to the figure Tavis mentioned at the last meeting.
Well, MED has a limit on 110 kW.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think at some point, we want to be in place with regulations if and when somebody comes in with a larger non-residential on your house solar array, so that we have some regulations that govern that. And if the contract expires and the number goes up, we'd be ready to address it. So I think it's something we certainly would like to encourage, but we probably want some protections in there, like maybe screening around it or something like that.
Okay, so the shorefront regulations, you're in favor of doing that as a priority?
When we see what Wolfeboro Waters comes up with.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And I think we do need to look at the zoning enforcement. That's, I think, was put in place in 2010, and it should be reviewed.
Oh, okay, well, that was done by the Board of Selectmen.
Well, we can still draft, I realize they adopted that, but we can still put something
Oh,
together
okay,
for
well,
the...
yeah, I think that would be a good discussion item, and then, I can take it to them. I mean, it shouldn't take that long to do zoning enforcement.
So
I
the
wouldn't
enforcement,
think.
the zoning enforcement part there, we've improved our stormwater regulations, and we'll be addressing our driveway permits, so that will all have to be brought up to the selectmen, because that will involve enforcement, won't it?
Well, the shorefront already requires.
No, I'm talking about stormwater regulations.
Yeah, right,
When
well,
we
that's-
upgrade
yeah,
that
yeah,
stuff up, so
yeah, right.
we'll be upgrading that, and then
Okay.
we'll have to meet with the selectmen or send them a letter that says, something to the effect that we've updated our driveway permit regulations along with our stormwater regulations, and we'd like to have the enforcement brought up to speed to enforce the things that need to be enforced.
Okay. What was the other one? Driveway, yeah, okay, right.
The other thing that seems to be getting a lot of attention is the concern about the town's water and sewer capacity, and I'm wondering if there's anything we can do to escalate that with the Board of Selectmen to get a report from them.
We're still waiting on receiving the reports from the engineers, the studies that they're doing on it, to give us the final report, so we know the capacities, where we're at now, what, build-outs and things like that are available to put onto the system. So, unfortunately, until we get it, we'll...
Do you have any timetable for that, Brad?
No, nothing I'd be comfortable saying right now. Should be soon. I mean, I expect it by, sometime in the early part of summer, I would say. I'd like to see it then, early enough so we'd be able to utilize it and work toward our, work it into our regulations here or our proposed regulations and stuff, so.
Okay. All right, well.
But isn't, no matter what we find out from the select board and this water and sewer, doesn't that have nothing to do with the current ADU allowance that every house can have one inside, as long as they can meet the water and sewer for their house?
ADU statute says that every lot with a single-family home can have an ADU.
Yeah.
The town needs to adjust and figure out how that factors into its own capacity.
But
So if somebody
they're-
wants an ADU and they're on water and sewer, they talk to water and sewer says yes or no on capacity. If they don't, they have to come up with their own solution.
like well and septic system.
Correct.
Which they may already have.
Correct.
So it shouldn't really slow that bit down a whole lot.
I don't know what the request was of the engineers and what the anticipated capacity was. So if the request that went to the engineers said that every lot may have, because every zone in town allows a single-family home. So if every vacant lot was told to the engineers to be one unit, that's going to be a problem when every lot by statute is allowed to house with an ADU. I don't know what was requested of the engineers. I don't know if the engineers were told the potential density capacity of the remaining lots, or if they were told anything.
But that's only if they're on town water and sewer though, right?
Correct.
Has nothing to do with all those other people that have their own.
The entire
systems.
water sewer discussion is who has water and sewer currently. One of the amendments that Brad has hinted at, but not said specifically, is the Forest Road extension that was recently voted in. It was never part of the original capacity discussion, so they've had to reevaluate based on those number of homes. And or the ADUs that come with them. But I don't know if that was part of that discussion or not.
And Julie, one of my concerns is that the water and sewer has been a popular topic whenever we're talking about density or development or housing capacity. So I think it's something that we should consider, even if it's not something we can correct ourselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But if we keep hearing that people are, they're trying to buy homes and that's one thing they're looking for is we need something to put, Grammy and Grandpa in, and they're, continually being turned down because, we're waiting for this report.
Well,
Well, maybe we should look over there because
no,
they're
I
still
don't think we
available.
are. I don't think we are. According to the discussions I've had with Dave Ford, he was aware of the ADU, and he said that he took that into account. Those are the attached
Right, I'm just,
ADUs. And so,
feeling it in the air is like, you hear that, oh, we're full up,
well, I don't,
but only right here.
okay.
Well, our ADU regulation clearly says that you have to have septic or sewer capacity. If we don't have it, you don't have it, if you're on town sewer. So
Yeah,
there you go. If there's a moratorium, there's a moratorium. And we've been through that before.
Brad, do you know anything about this? Because I have been going ahead thinking that the ADU attached was fine, because that's what I was told. Is that not the case now?
The attached ADUs, if somebody comes in that's on the public system here, if they're another ADU into that building is going to be considered another bedroom.
Okay,
The houses are charged their impact fee or user fees, I guess is what they are, per bedroom, you know. I think it's $6,000 for up to a 3-bedroom home. If they add another bedroom, goes to a 4-bedroom home, there's another additional fee goes onto that for the user hookup fee plus, you know, the extra fee they'd be paying per gallon to tie in. I don't think anybody has said that I know of that every house in the town now that's on water and sewer is factored in to the existing system for that expansion of adding another unit onto that, into that formula. I don't think that calculation's ever been done that I know of, and nothing I've heard about. So
okay.
at some point, if we get up to that maximum capacity, as Vaughn and Julia saying, it's going to be dependent upon availability of, you know, water and septic disposal, whether it's a well, septic system, or town access. And if we're maxed out, then there's going to be, the permit would be denied because there wouldn't be the availability to tie into the system if we're maxed out.
But we're required to do this by the state statute. That's where I'm,
Say it again, Kathy?
we're required to adopt this ADU by way of a state statute.
Right.
So when we first started talking about this, I know that Dave Ford knew about this and didn't have any concerns. He then, when we talked about the detached, he said, oh, wait a minute, there may be a problem. But he wasn't concerned about the attached.
It shouldn't be, because the attached or detached, whether it's attached or
Right.
detached, it would be the exact same effect on the system.
Yeah, okay. All right.
so-
I'm just
Maybe he was
telling you
thinking
what
within the town
I
or
was
without the
told.
town.
So just to
Yeah.
clarify, anybody can come into town, and if they have the physical space on their lot left, they can make an addition, whether it's an ADU or not. They can say, I would like 6 bedrooms to add on to this. So if it's an ADU, it doesn't matter. It's just sheer volume capacity. So counting
That's right.
potentials, additional ADUs is just an exercise in strangeness, because you could add 3 or 4 bedrooms on every house too. So I'm not sure where that calculation can even drive you.
Well, I'm not, I agree, but that was one of the big concerns when the Warren article came up, is that somehow the detached ADUs were going to be taxing on the water and sewer system, without realizing someone could come in and propose 15-bedroom addition and have a permit the next day.
It's not logical.
It's not logical.
So I think to Vaughn's point, if a lot owner came in on the town system and wanted to add 4 bedrooms to the home, and we were maxed out on it, that would be another, not ability, but it'd be another thing the town would have to look at for denying the permit, because there's not the availability to add that amount of flow into the system. So that would be with the town working through the building, you know, planning and zoning there, and the building inspector to deny the permit because there's not a capacity. At that point, they'd have to look at the option of possibly, you know, putting a septic system on their property to take that extra flow, or, you know, work something else out like that. So, to Vaughn's point there, it's not just ADUs that will be looking at, it's any type of
right.
expansion of a home.
Right.
So,
So I think the letter that Dave Ford sent out was, he had no additional capacity above the 1,500 lots that were currently out there. I think he was looking at large-scale development that would put a high influx into the system. But when you add dribs and drabs of a house here, a house there, or if you added 1,500 ADUs, then you will probably be getting to his 1,500 houses.
So it sounds to me like everybody's got a very interesting opinion on this, and there's a lot of interest in the topic. But again, while it might be a priority for our discussion, we're not going to resolve it today.
Might be fun to have the engineers come in with a copy of the report after people have time to review it and explain what it means to the planning board.
Yes, that
Yeah.
would be useful.
That'd be a real good idea.
Right, okay.
And we could be
Okay,
teach
so
together.
density will be a discussion item then. Okay. And so we've decided the shoreline regulations seems to be a priority. The definition for the half bath and whatever the ground floor is, we'll come up with something like that. Conservation subdivision regulations, that's on for discussion if we have time later this evening. And so we have sort of decided that that was a priority, right?
To amend it
Yeah,
or fix it.
right, to
so
amend
that
it.
it becomes something that would be beneficial to use, and people would be attracted to it, developers, let's say.
Okay, as far as manufactured housing overlay, I'm not sure that's really a priority if we're trying to deal with some of these other issues. I mean, was there something in the regulations that needs to be changed, or?
It doesn't say what the board thinks it says. So if that's not a problem, that's fine.
The,
It's not as though the office is getting overrun with people looking at manufactured communities. But currently, it requires a variance to do what the original intent of the regulation stated. It's not hard to do, but it might be cumbersome to explain to the public.
Tavis, do you know how old that regulation is?
Old,
So it's probably way out of date at this point.
very. I think the town adopted originally when the state said you can't zone mobile homes out of a community. But there are sections of the manufactured housing overlay district. I mean, it is a very large section of town. So the board might want to revisit the parameters of the manufactured overlay. Are these the best areas in town to do this? Yes, no. Did we really intend water and sewer hookup to be required in portions of the manufactured housing overlay? Yes, no. Did we really want each of the lots in a manufactured housing subdivision to have to meet the underlying base zone lot size? Probably not. That's the big glaring one.
So, Tavis, do you think that that topic would take a lot of time to review?
I can't speak to the board members' comfort level with the regulations. In short, no. But it might take a while to get everyone up to speed with this. This is what these 5 words mean. Here's a proposed change, agree to disagree, and then trying to explain that to the public.
Also,
It's nothing like half-bath ground floor.
right, and we have to have a really good definition of what a manufactured
Yes.
housing is.
That's the
key.
other fun element, because there
Yeah.
are many manufactured homes that are coming into town as single-family homes. The manufactured overlay only applies to manufactured trailer parks. Sorry. You're not supposed to use the T word anymore. You're not supposed to use the trailer park phrase anymore. But the ordinance is set up to address manufactured housing communities, i.e. parks. So Birch Hill, things of that nature. But I mean, you can't even really purchase the homes that were originally the source of the statute. They're just not made anymore.
So essentially, the statute's obsolete.
Right.
No, the premise is valid, but the housing type has morphed in the
Okay.
past 30 years.
So much so that you can have a very nice house brought in either in panels or in boxes. You know, what is that? Where does that fall? I wouldn't think it falls in this thought, but who knows? Because I don't know what the,
No, the last one that came up was the one that Geordie Hutchinson had out on Pine Hill, where he said, I'm looking at doing X number of units on X size lot. That triggers the manufactured housing overlay. The way it's worded, the planning board actually has to grant a waiver, if you will, to the lot size being 50 by 100, when the premise is actually furthering what the conservation subdivision is looking at. But the way the statute is written, it's or not the way the statute is written, the way the regulation is written, you need a variance for lot size. ZBA cleared up some of that mud, but a lot of it, quite honestly, if the board wants to keep it, it's easier, more easily done with some illustrations. This is how this works, this is what this means, this is how these pieces come together, and it's not a dramatic change.
Oh, okay.
But that is predicated on the demand for water and sewer, though.
No.
'Cause well, it kind of is, because that's what Geordie ran into.
No.
He wanted to do sewer through the town, and we said we don't have the capacity to do it. So,
Well, Geordie knew he couldn't do sewer on one part and knew he had sewer on the other. The question was there adequate sewer, and that didn't have an answer, but that wasn't the manufactured part.
okay, so we don't need to wait till the report comes out to tackle that then?
To oversimplify that entire report, I don't think the planning board needs to be worried about density limits that are currently allowed by the regulations, because those should have been the basis for the report. It's only where the board is looking at changing the density allowances beyond what's currently on the books that should be based on what the report says. Does that make sense?
So where would you see it in our discussion, before or after the report,
For what?
to do this, review this ordinance?
Well, you're currently allowed to have a manufactured housing subdivision, and there's a method to get from point A to point B in the regulations right now. It's just not worded in a very succinct manner. So it could happen before or after the report.
So is it an easy fix or a hard fix?
Again, it depends on how much you understand the current manufactured housing overlay and how it relates to the subdivision regulations. In practical terms, it's very simple.
So it's if I could give my interpretation, I think, of what Tavis is trying to say is that the fix may be easy, but explaining the issues surrounding it to us
Correct.
may be more lengthy.
Right. And to the community.
And to the community, yes.
Community.
Well, we have to understand it to be
Right.
able to present it ourselves to the community.
Right. So the changes that I would be recommending are not to increase the prevalence of, or increase the density of, or increase the frequency of, but to clarify the permitting process for someone desiring a manufactured housing subdivision.
Good way to put it.
Subdivision, you just said, not manufactured housing. Not manufactured house, but subdivision is what you just said.
Manufactured housing
It's two separate things.
communities, correct. The change would have no impact on manufactured housing coming to town. The 367 square foot single-family home that was just recently permitted on Stoneham Road would not be impacted by the change.
Okay, elderly affordable nonprofit regulations, it seems to me that was just a wording change.
Well, the elderly affordable nonprofit regulation review, I'm suggesting that because there's reference to the term special exception in the language, but it also speaks to the planning board taking final action that would negate a special exception. Elderly affordable not-for-profit housing projects are allowed by right in many zones, i.e. they don't require a special exception, but for some reason the ordinance itself refers to a special exception. So the planning board has a guidance document from legal counsel should one of these projects come in the interim, but it should be clarified on what that process is for elderly not-for-profit. One of the other reasons this is on the list is because elderly not-for-profit has a density incentive that is not available to other housing types in town, which is against state statute. So this is a twofold one. The planning board had actually recommended an article that addressed all of this with a revision to inclusionary that failed last March. So
Okay,
this-
well, let's stick to elderly affordable.
what's that?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is its own issue.
It's its own section that would have been resolved with the other article, but now because that article failed, that still needs work as well as the elderly and not-for-profit. Yes.
So I would suggest that we would want to keep that as a priority since it's a state statute conflict.
Yeah, right.
I think those state statute issues go to the top of the list. Yeah.
The other one that seems quite straightforward, I think, is Bay Street Limited and Wolfeboro Falls Limited districts where it says in the regulations that it has to be consistent with the multifamily regulations, that you can't have residents on the first floor. But yet, when you go to the multifamily section, it says nothing like that.
Right, so in your packet are the two zones. It's a back-to-back piece, it's right after the road regulations in the packet. There's the Bay Street Limited Business District and the Wolfeboro Falls Limited Business District. So the problem arises that permitted uses include single detached dwelling, duplex dwelling, and then later on, residential apartments not permitted on the first floor. So the way the ZBA has been interpreting this is that residential isn't allowed on the first floor. The problem is that negates single and duplex. So I think what we talked about at the last meeting is that the board's original premise, and I don't know this, I wasn't here, but the original premise was to make a permitted use being residential apartments on the second or third floors of existing businesses. And that's not what this says.
Correct.
Right. I mean, when you read the
So really,
multifamily...
for each of these zones, you could simply delete that
Yeah.
and be done with the whole amendment.
I think it also had to do with kind of suggesting that a retail business should be on the first floor rather than an apartment on a first floor, the walk up to the retail store.
Correct. So
And it doesn't say that either.
So the question is the planning board's intent for vacant land to require someone to bring a retail or commercial use on the first floor and apartments above, or if somebody simply wants to do an apartment building, is that precluded?
But multifamily, it says that supersedes any other regulation, so,
I agree. I'm
that's-
just asking the board's
yeah. Okay.
northing on this.
Well, since I spend almost all my day in the Wolfeboro Falls Limited District, and I'm surrounded by both businesses on the first floor as well as apartment buildings around me, and it always has been for as long as I've lived in Wolfeboro, like a long time, I think it works well being all mixed up like that. So I think probably what happened is this just got worded poorly, because the apartments aren't changing that have always been there, and the businesses that have always been there are not changing.
So it sounds like this should be an easy one to resolve.
Yes, right. That's-
It could be one of the avenues to look at, and this to John's pending question that he doesn't know was a pending question, after the survey, or after the water sewer analysis is done, it might be the purview of the board to use retail or other commercial space on the first floor as an incentive for greater density on the second and third floor.
But that's not what we're talking about right now.
Well, one is just clarifying whether apartments on the first floor is good, bad. That's the simple fix.
Yes.
Another option, if the board is looking at housing, is to say, but if you were to bring a commercial use on the first floor, here's your bonus, whether it's workforce, affordable, elderly, nonprofit, et cetera. But that would have to happen after we find out what the system can handle.
All right, so not being here when this was crafted, I think probably in the Wolfeboro Falls Limited Business District, there were more residents on the first floor, and then they tried to expand the commercial zone a little bit, so they wanted the businesses to primarily be on the first floor, and then we moved the residents up to the second floor. So that's would be my understanding how it got to where it is right now.
Probably, since most of those small houses are converted that way.
Right, but I mean, if this, again, ask the public what the thought process is. If it's the board's thought that it is, quote, or should be, I should say, illegal to have apartments on the first floor, then this needs some language. If the idea is that we'd prefer commercial on the first floor, but if it's only residential, then so be it, that's a different change. So the board just has to tell me which way you want to go.
Well, I mean, I think the regulations tell us which way we want to go, because it says the multifamily section takes precedent over anything else. So when you look at the multifamily, it says you can have as many dwelling units as you want to, or that will fit on a property. Doesn't say anything about ground floor or anything, so that's the issue that,
So again, the simple thing would be to remove that reference in both zones. That's a piece of cake.
yeah,
Not permitted on the ground.
Well, just to,
just for the
just to,
just for a
because
multifamily.
it's a restriction written as a permitted use, so it's sort of conflicting.
Right. Okay.
So I don't understand what you just said, Kathy. So you want to take out the multifamily in the downtown area there?
No, I don't want to do anything with the multifamily.
Okay.
I was just trying to make it so these two zones were consistent with each other.
Okay.
That's all I was trying to do.
All right.
Okay, let's see. Okay, well, we've got 3 priorities. Well, actually, we've got 4. And the elderly, we've agreed that we had to do something, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And termination of the boathouse on Winnipesaukee. No, that would mean no new boathouses on Lake Winnipesaukee.
Well, I would say while that's something we can discuss, I wouldn't put it as a priority.
Yeah, it's probably not going to make the priority list, but again, it does have a shoreland impact, and it does degrade the quality of the shorefront in those areas. I know that some people like to be able to have them built because for whatever reason, they're permitted by the state. But again, there is large-scale environmental impact when it comes to boathouses. Again, people can't build their homes down next to the water, and right there, boats usually have a lot of lifts now. They lift them out of the water. Boats are usually 40 or 50 feet long if they're a big boat. I mean, does the big boat even fit in the boathouse anymore is the question. So I think there's a lot of environmental impact there. Maybe the Conservation Commission, I know the former Conservation Commission chairman has some thoughts on it also, Dan Coons. So, you know, there is some discussionary points there that could be brought forward.
I'd like to see the evidence that it's detrimental to the environment. I mean, surely it has temporary impact during construction, but that has all sorts of rules about, you know, buoys and dams and erosion protection there for that purpose. When it's all done, it has no negative impact that I've ever seen on the shore.
So I'm to that point, if it's natural, there's no impact. But if it's not natural, there's impact.
That's a study that you've seen?
No, but I mean, I don't know if there is a study out there. I'm not referencing a study, so I'm not basing it on the study. But what I am saying is if it's natural, there's no impact. But if there's been something that's been dug in or was constructed, that's impact.
But is the impact negative?
It's not natural, so there has to be negative impact.
Well, so are breakwaters, not natural, but it's stone. I mean, so maybe if you pull in a boathouse, you have to push out a breakwater, you know, to allow the fish to enjoy the stones. I'm not really sure what animal is protected or what thing is a problem. I know there are lots of animals in boathouses and in the water in boathouses. So.
And to one of your comments, John, you said 40 or 50-foot boats. I don't think I've ever seen a 50-foot boat in Wolfeboro.
Well, maybe down at the town docks, but not in a boathouse.
That's what I mean, not in any of the boathouses.
Right.
I mean, just for fun, it would be fun to see the environmental impact statement that was done for the dam that made Winnipesaukee, but, you know, I'll digress.
Okay, the solar regulations, we don't really know that we're going to be
We
going.
just have to get the subcommittee together and see what the
Yeah,
recommendations
yeah, right.
are,
So
and
that's
Roger
not
had
really-
commented on it earlier, so I think there's,
Okay, so what do you folks think we should do about short-term rentals?
I think we should define it. I
Okay.
still think we should define
We
it.
did define it,
I know.
Well, we attempted
tried
We
to
should
go
make
on.
it more clear why we're defining it.
right. And remember, Peter said when he comes back, he'll help write
Because
some
I
of that
think-
stuff
I think
more
I
simply.
think the board needs to have a discussion with the public about its intent to look at housing, whether it's creating housing, preserving water, sewer, limiting short-term, not limiting short-term, because it might be that the preferred option would be to define short-term rental, but put areas of town where it is or is not okay. I mean, it was very simple to say short-term rental is X, and if you don't have X by this date, you can't have a new one. I think that scared people.
I don't know, I think people might have been scared because we were eliminating the ones that are already there, which is not the case.
Right.
But it's a little I think it was massive confusion.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But at the same
Yeah.
time, the planning board was motivated by a very small number of the population at the short-term rental committee to come up with a first step. I mean, perhaps the safest thing to do is say, let's see if the state defines it and comes up with the parameters. But again, the town might want to have its own, I mean, let's do it Wolfeboro way before you're mandated to do it by the state, one way or the other.
Well, can't we at least get a definition, and then if we need to change it later, we can?
Yeah,
But at
there's
least we'll
currently
have a
not even a
definition.
state definition of a short-term rental. I mean, there's 3 different versions depending on which statute you look at, so.
Well, if we have sort of a public discussion about the housing, we could talk about short-term rent. I mean, that's just going to come up.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure it is.
And
I mean, it
so-
might be helpful for the public to think or realize that the planning board just didn't decide to just define this out of the blue. It was in response to balancing all the other pieces.
Right, so that may be something that maybe we could plan on doing in June or
Yeah.
at the work session.
And perhaps we could put out recommended reading, because there is a lot of reading on the impact of short-term rentals on the housing stock. And it's a big issue. It's
Right.
making it completely unaffordable generally across the nation. So, I mean, it's just a brief study or a brief article that defines one of the problems with our housing shortage. And then we might find some Lakes Region economic development article, which somebody sent me one, that says this is the kind of thing that we need to house people who will work in town within a half hour of their job. You know, these are the kind of solutions that might help. So I can send that to,
That-
yeah.
Okay, so would everybody like to sort of plan on kind of a public meeting
Yes.
to discuss? Okay, so why don't we try to do that in June or July, okay?
I'll be shooting for the June planning board meeting.
Yes, sooner,
June 20th?
sooner.
Yeah, okay.
So what about like a survey monkey? I know Rob used to send them to us, and we could rate them, and then we could give our feedback, and then he would round it up and give us what we all think is the direction.
That had a cost associated with it.
I can find out if anyone in town still has a Survey Monkey, but you're going to have to come up with questions and answers. Probably worth doing a roundtable on what the answers might mean. So you're not trying to figure it out after the fact what people meant, and maybe, I mean, that might be a push for a June response at this point.
Yeah, and also that, you know, after the meeting, say that emails are welcome on your thoughts.
Yeah, it might be that the June meeting leads to the Survey Monkey. This is what we heard, you know, we
Right.
put together an informational forum, here's the Survey Monkey. None of the changes, or what I'm anticipating would be changes for any of these things under potential warrant articles, take long to write. It's just a matter of making sure it's written in the direction the board wants to go based on the feedback it has.
Right.
So don't think if you wait for a June informational and then there's a Survey Monkey or 2 and we end up in August, September, we can still comply with the December deadline. Because realistically, we should be getting some of the anticipated public comments up ahead of time.
We do need to make sure it's focused so we get the information that we want.
Correct.
We don't have people talking about, building
Well, that's what I mean.
skyscrapers in North Wolfeboro.
Right. Well, the height limit hasn't been a topic yet, but I get what you're saying.
So it actually provides information that's useful.
Correct.
The road construction, that probably should be on the potential warrant articles. I mean, are you close to, you and,
These aren't a warrant article. This is something the planning board would adopt.
this?
That's something the planning board would adopt for the
Yes,
public
right.
hearing, right?
And,
So all I did is promise at the last meeting was give everybody a copy of what it currently says.
yes,
Look through it, come up with questions, email away. I can come back at a future work session with the recommendations from DPW.
okay, but you also had said that you were talking to Steve at Public Works
Correct.
about this, and he needs to have input into this.
Correct. I can bring that back at the next work session. I have his input and I can revise this. If anyone wants to comment in the interim before, see, what would that?
And that is why you all received this in your packet, the road construction, so you could kind of see what it looks like. The planning board did adopt it, and then more recently, we adopted it again, so.
I would suggest if planning board members have a comment or question that could be emailed to me by 5/5, all of that could be incorporated and come back at the 5/16 meeting with the Public Works recommendations.
Yeah, I think we need some people with some expertise to provide input to us.
What?
Such as
Say that
who?
again, Roger?
Well, I can think of somebody. I don't know if anybody in this room remembers a gentleman by the name of Chester Chalman, but he wrote something referred to in this, the traditional neighborhood development street design guidelines. Maybe he'd be willing to give us, his variety of streets and why they were designed and for what. I don't see anything in here for a one-way street, for instance.
Correct.
To lower the impact of the size of things. And to make, let's say, if we're trying to encourage strategic, conservation developments, then, maybe a one-way street is a way to minimize the cost for that street around the parkland or whatever else we might benefit from or the community might benefit from. It's not very flexible, in my opinion.
And the stormwater regulation should be, that can just be taken out of the site plan and referenced for this, so that people,
Well, the initial comments from Steve Randall are that the road should be taken as a given in roads, and when someone's doing a subdivision with roads, the stormwater has to account for what's coming off with the road. So
Right.
you're not going to be modifying the road design, you're going to be saying, this is the road that was required, which is going to create X water. How does your subdivision design account for said water?
yeah, right. Well, and the stormwater regulations are in subdivision and site plan.
Correct.
I think we are headed in the right direction, John, I think. Okay, that's good.
Well, so am I going out to look for a professional to look at the road design standards?
No, I thought you and,
Well, I was working with Steve Randall, but there was a comment about seeking outside help. So I can put together an RFQ or an RFP and come back to the board and see if you want to hire someone.
So what are you looking at?
The standards.
Yeah, but why are we questioning?
Yeah, I'm asking you what you're looking for in the standards that's
Right.
specific. I just went through them here
Yeah.
and looked at them real quick, so what are you looking for? And I could help you relate.
I'm going to defer to the person that made the comment.
I just think we need somebody with some expertise, because I read this thing over and I'm well aware that I'm not an expert on road construction.
And I've seen lots of different kinds of road designs, and I find that this is on the wide, high end of things. And to allow some more flexibility, let's say to add one-way streets or, limited traffic streets, let's say you've only got a 7-lot subdivision, you Do you really want to have to put in a large 50-foot right-of-way? You know, when you could probably get away with 35 feet? You know,
I think a lot of that, Vaughn, has to do with like, fire rescue. Doesn't it have to be 2 fire trucks passing?
The reason the standards are written the way they are is because over time, people have come into this community and said, I want this to be a private road forever. And 20 years later, they say, I don't want to pay for this. Here, town. So the reason this is set up this way is to say this is requiring from the get-go a road that, if need be, the town could take over in the future. We don't have, for example, plowing capacity to do a one-way 12-foot travel lane. So it's written for what the town can handle in the future. It's very hard to convince. So you look at most of the properties, let's use Robin Acres, for example. You go through the Robin Acres minutes, it was very clear that the person that proposed that never wanted it to be a town road, ever. I'm specifically making it narrow so you won't take it. I'm telling the planning board I don't want the town to take it. But now we're on the second, and in some cases, third owner in there, and they're saying, we don't want to maintain this road. So there are some people saying, town, will you take it? So there are other things that are lesser known in the road regulations. Let's go back to, let's just pick Robin Acres. When the water line first went into Robin Acres, it goes right down the middle of the road. Well, isn't that creative? Because even though it's a private road, if the town ever needs to replace the water line, they're rebuilding the road, because in order to fix the water line, you're tearing up the road. So there are stipulations in here that say, no, the utilities are to the side. That's why you have a 50-foot easement or a 60-foot right-of-way, and even though it's only 24 feet of pavement, the utilities are outside the pavement. So there's all of those little, I'll say, games for Roger's benefit, the attorney games that get played on where you put the
Springfield Point was another case in point.
Exactly. So that's where the width is coming from. Nothing in here says a 60-foot wide paved road. That's Route 16. That's 60 feet of blacktop. This is 60 foot of right-of-way with.
20 foot or 24 foot.
Correct.
And you also need the width
So
to get your drainage in and all that stuff there too.
Correct. So the question, some of the questions that Steve and I have been looking at, do we need a ditch cross-section? Do we need a variation on ditch cross-section? Do we need to be looking at the design of the ambulance and fire apparatus that are availing homes to find out how we transition from said town road or paved surface on a private road to get to a driveway? That all has to happen within the right-of-way, because we actually don't have driveway regulations that limit the incline of a driveway. But if somebody comes off the standard road crown and hits a 12% driveway, fire trucks don't work. So that's where a lot of this is coming from. But I'm more than happy to have a third party, if the board can define it, look at that.
Brad, what do you think about having somebody else look at these?
I have a lot of faith in Steve Randall's ability to look at it. I'm going through it too and stuff. I got some notes written on them too and stuff. I've dealt with these my whole life too here. So I think we could come up with some suggestions on what we have here in front of us now, and then if the board felt it should be reviewed, with these suggestions that we come up with, we could send it out to a consultant to have a look at it and see. But it would probably be more economical to do it that way rather than have them just take this document that we have now and come back to us with their suggested changes. Would be kind of my approach on it. Then also kind of a separate item we got mentioned here a little bit is on the taking over of these roads, as Tavis talking about Robin Acres up there. We are redoing our policy and procedures for the selectmen to accept a town road for a layout of a town road now and stuff. So that's being updated as we speak. So so that whole process is going to be, it kind of gets handled at the selectman level anyway, not at the planning board level. But, it's important to have these regulations, the design standards here. And Tavis is absolutely right, because, on the Robert Acres one, because, I was only a kid working up there then, but I remember that happening by the developer at the time, making those statements, so it was a long time ago, I will say that.
Yeah, it was.
Long before I knew where Wolfeboro was. That's what I meant, Brad.
Okay,
I'm absolutely fine with Steve and Brad taking the first initial look and then seeing if we need
Oh,
somebody
yeah, this
else.
isn't something I'm concocting.
yeah,
This is
what
road folks.
That's what I was thinking too. I think that's a good suggestion. Go ahead, you and Steve, and bring it back, and then,
I got one other comment.
Yeah.
So basically, when somebody comes in front of us for something like this, the subdivision or it's a site plan, and usually don't we have the engineer look at this stuff before it's brought in front of the planning board anyway?
Yep.
So, I mean, that's kind of what I'm seeing. We already have a process where it's
right,
the engineer is supposed to give us the impression that it's okay,
yes, that's
because it's a
right.
site plan or it's a subdivision regulation.
Right, and we do have a consulting engineer.
So they would be
Yeah.
the ones that would want to look at it to say, are these good for us? Because they're the ones who are reviewing them and giving us the information. Because other than that, it's just a bunch of bullet point and definitions and, I mean, it's very little applicability for the average homeowner here. It's more about the construction end of it.
Right,
Just for clarity, the third-party engineer is not looking to see whether it's good or bad for the town. The third-party engineer is looking to see whether what's proposed complies with the regulations. So the town has to be sure it's asking for the right thing. The third-party engineer then affirms for the board's benefit that, yes, the road standard was followed, checkbox, to allow the board to go forward. So we have to make sure we're asking for the road we want so that somebody designs around what we're looking for. The third party then reviews it and says, yes, that is what you're looking for. And then off it goes through the process.
So how is a board going to review and comment to an engineer who is going to give his determination on his specs?
Well, the point is the board doesn't have to. The board's relying on the third-party engineer to look at the regs and say, these are the regs, and yes, they've been satisfied. So the board then says, great, so the road's been designed correctly. Now about the stormwater. The same engineer has the stormwater regulations and says, yes, they've been complied with. So the board doesn't have to sit and reevaluate and question if everything is put forward. The engineer is looking for compliance with the regulations. That make sense?
It does, but again, they're the ones who are reviewing it, and we're just layman people reviewing the application. So we're not.
That's why you have the engineer looking at it.
No, I think you two are talking about two different things. So
Yeah.
I think that you're talking about somebody who's submitting an application to build a road, and the engineer will review it to make sure it's in compliance with our regulations.
Correct.
I think what you're asking about is proposing the regulations and who's going to determine them. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, so you're talking about two different things.
Can I just ask Brad a question?
well, can we just finish this up, and then
Well, it has to do with the roads.
So again, the engineer should be giving the determination on this.
Yeah, you're talking about establishing the regulations,
Yes.
and Tavis is talking about complying with them.
Complying to it, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So to your question, who do we talk to as an expert to establish the regulation as we think it should be?
So perhaps maybe Brad, Steve, and I look at the regulations and make a recommendation, have that evaluated by an engineer, and then present to the board.
Right.
Yeah, that would
Well,
be better.
that was my
all
question.
right.
Doesn't Steve in DPW already have an engineer on board that he asks questions of anyway? So why should we hire an engineer when DPW's already got one?
I don't think they do.
I don't
Okay.
have one here.
We don't have one specifically for that task right now.
I
But
think
if there was a
I think the
question, there would be
original.
somebody he could
I-
ask.
I think the original concern perhaps is that Roger thought perhaps I was rewriting the road regulations without knowing what a road was.
No,
And I don't do that.
no.
Well, that's not quite the way I phrased it.
No, you phrased it differently, but I
I was
thought.
not actually thinking of you.
No, okay.
And I'd kind of hope that, over in the road section, that Steve will be going, semi-annually or whatever to, conferences and things and being up to date on all the new stuff. So he should have the most up-to-date information anyway, or have access to it. So he's already in that space.
To that end, the cross-sections that are in here have not changed for a very long time.
Right.
It's still the DOT standard. But there are many roads in town that aren't built anywhere close to the DOT standard.
Okay. All right, so what I have for priority is the road construction, shoreland regulations, conservation subdivision, manufactured housing. I wasn't clear on that.
It's not as, the fix is almost as wordy as the title.
Okay, and then to have well, you're going to come back in May with the construction, road construction, and then we're talking about having a housing that would then focus on short-term rental issues in June,
A public session.
a public session.
Yes.
Right,
And housing, not just short-term, but
We'll put that in the paper
housing.
and everything else.
yeah, right.
But I don't know if you want a subcommittee or a subgroup or something to start pulling that together, because there's a lot of verbiage that needs to get phrased and rephrased and packaged, as opposed to just inviting people in and deciding to talk about housing.
Yeah, need to be clear in what we present to the public as the intent of the meeting.
Correct.
So should we shoot for the water and sewer study in August?
Well, that,
Any chance of that?
It's going to depend when we get it, John. I mean, I'm hoping we get it early summer so we'll be able to factor that into our work sessions. But we're at the mercy of receiving it and evaluating it at that time.
And John, I think that we can have if you want to call it a housing forum or public session, whatever you want to call it, independent of the water and sewer. We need to determine what the town's priorities are and what the needs are, because the needs are going to be the needs, whether you have the water and sewer or not. And then you're going to have to address the water and sewer to somehow meet the needs.
And we can tell the public that we're waiting for the report.
That's right, which we've said a few times already.
okay, and then the residential units on the first floor, that's an easy one. For the
scratch it.
Bay Street and.
We hope so,
Wolfeboro.
yes.
One would think, but one has been surprised recently.
Okay, all right, well, I think we've made some progress here. Okay. All right, can we skip over conservation subdivision discussion?
The only reason I put it on the agenda, one, because you told me to, but two, the first thing that's in your packet is a memo that was put together for the board a while ago, and then also in the packet is a draft. It was talked about at the last meeting. It's the last draft revision to conservation subdivision. So my only thought, or the thought that Vaughn and I had, was to get members a copy. If you have questions, concerns, I specifically didn't number it because I didn't want to confuse people with current regulations, but refer to it by page number, paragraph, what's this mean, how's this work, and Vaughn and I will come up with a revision, probably coming back either late May or after the June forum, so.
Well, and maybe we'll come back with concepts
Yeah.
to see if you want to go in that direction or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, okay. All right, a couple other items that have come up. The planning conference, you sent something out about the planning conference on April
Yes,
29th. Is there a cost for that?
I will cover it if there is a cost. If people want to sign up, let me know. and
Okay,
we'll
well, I
do-
did sign up, and I didn't see anything about a cost,
I
but maybe
don't
I'll
think
get
there is a
bill.
cost, or it's nominal if there is one. And my guess is if you can't make it that day, there's going to be a recording of it that can be downloaded later, so.
Oh, okay, but this is not going to be, I mean, this is all a Zoom thing.
Correct.
Yes, right. So if anybody wants to sign up, it really is pretty easy. and, to kind of listen in on some of the issues.
So is that the one you're speaking at, Tavis? Well,
No.
No,
what's the one that you're speaking at?
in Meredith, right?
That's the New Hampshire Planning Association, I think they call it their spring meeting. It's on June 2nd in Meredith. Plymouth, excuse me, it's in Plymouth. Meredith is next week for Lakes Region.
Okay, let's see, I received or I sent you a couple emails. And the first one was from Amy Muccio that I received this afternoon. And it's about a code of ethics and sort of guidance for how we're supposed to proceed. I mean, it says that it's for the chairman, but it really is what the office does. But there are a couple issues that I thought we should discuss, because this really clearly says that for the Board of Selectmen and its subcommittees, and we're really not a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen, so, I think we have to figure that out or get in touch with the selectmen or Jim Pinio or someone and get that kind of straightened out. But could we just go through, first of all, the code of ethics and see if anybody has any thoughts on that? I mean, Doug, I guess you sent them a revision of it?
Yes, so I noticed some punctuation and syntax errors in it, so I've sent suggested changes to Amy Muccio earlier today, but I don't think that's pertinent to our discussion here this evening.
Okay, well, that means we may be getting a different one. But anyway, so
Well,
did anybody have any?
The question now, in my mind, is if we're not a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen, does either of those documents apply?
Well,
No, I think it should.
So I don't think that these documents apply to us currently, but perhaps we can use the code of ethics that the Board of Selectmen have established and adopt it for the planning board.
Yeah.
It might be a separate document, just change the title.
Might be modifying the rules of procedure.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I would agree with Doug. I did happen to speak to a selectman about this and was told that it really was something the selectmen were dealing with, and they felt it was important for that board to have this, and they sent it out. But it was not; they were not trying to impose it on the planning board or beyond their committees.
And I think we've had memos from our attorney on what qualifies as a conflict of interest and direction on what to do in the case that there may or may not be. I mean, it was like a page-and-a-half document of what the process was. So I don't know if this is different than that, but it strikes me as it's not as comprehensive. Maybe we could share that document.
I mean, there is case law.
Yeah, well, this came from the attorney.
Statutory,
Yeah.
that it does address this. I mean, if you're a butter, you have a conflict, and there's a whole list of things, and usually it's if you have an interest which is different than a member of the public, then you have a conflict.
Wait a minute. So if this member of the public, I don't agree with what they say?
No.
If you have an interest which is different than the general public. So
If your relation to the project is different than the public's relation, then you have a conflict. Just because you disagree doesn't mean you have
no,
a conflict.
that has nothing to do
And
with it.
certainly if you're qualified in some specific area, you might have a conflict with something because your expertise does not agree with
No,
their
that's not a
expertise.
conflict. If it's your,
But if it's your project, you shouldn't be voting on it.
I get that, I get that. But then there were in that memo, she described what the process is, what you do, how you recuse yourself, or in one case, I think I asked the board if they felt I had a conflict of interest. I didn't think I had one, and then I think the rules were they could advise me whether or not they agreed or disagreed with me, but I didn't have to follow
Right.
that recommendation. So that's a
that's
lengthier version of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, there is that process. and
Yeah.
You explained it correctly.
So,
Well, I think what we need to do, I mean, I don't have any problem with the code of ethics. I think that's a great idea, but we need to take a look at this and make sure that it meets our requirements, I think.
Well, I think since it came out this afternoon, it would only be appropriate to have people have a little bit more
Yeah,
time than
right.
2 hours to look at it, and then,
Yeah, the other thing,
because the documents that you received are very different from what all the employees received, which is a much more substantive policy.
okay, on the municipal committee chair guide, it says that we're supposed to have a current list of members with term, date, and email address to go on the town website. We don't have that now.
We don't have email addresses, but it's long been the purview of planning board members not to have their personal email
Right.
online.
That's why I'm having this
Oh,
discussion.
I understand.
Yeah.
This was as shocking to me today as it was for,
so we don't have to follow this. I don't particularly want mine online.
I don't think there's a statutory requirement for all board members to have their email address on a website, no.
No, emails should go to you.
Yeah, right.
That's how most boards operate, yes.
Well, the
Yeah.
discussion was years ago that the town would provide us all with a certain email that we could use, that we could use those emails rather than our personal emails.
It would take about 30 seconds to come up with planningboard@wolfeboronh.us or something like that. Or if you want, we can do every member. But does every member really want a separate email address, or do you want planning board communications coming through a staff member, question mark?
Well, in my experience so far, there hasn't been a need for me at least, to have an individual email address.
No, and it could cause a problem, like I got trash one day, out of the blue, from a Facebook thing that came through my business email, like on a Monday morning.
Well,
We don't really need that, I
Yeah,
don't
it-
think
yeah.
personally.
In line with the whole concept here is that we can't individually do anything anyway. It should
Right.
never come to us individually. It always has to go, through a source that is the town committee. So I think having individuals picked out means that individuals then can group up. So,
okay, but do you all agree that we really shouldn't have our email addresses
yeah.
on the website? For
Correct.
the reasons that we just mentioned, that it has always been our policy to have everything go to the planning director.
I agree with
So
that.
that we don't run into issues. Yeah, okay, so everybody's comfortable with that?
For the record, I don't hide things from you. If it comes to me, it goes to you.
Okay, all right. Okay, so that was pretty much what that was all about. And I sent out a request saying that I really need another planning board member on CIP with me. Is anybody interested in that? I didn't receive any,
I think a problem may be, Kathy, that you guys meet at like 10 o'clock in the morning on a weekday. And we all work,
okay,
just saying.
okay,
You could pass that along.
okay. So, no, all right, okay.
You could always ask for nominations.
Okay, well, that's okay. I'll carry the flag. Don't worry about a thing. Okay, let's see. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Sorry to hold you folks up, but
It's not on.
I
Yeah,
think
sure,
it
I'll
is.
slide
Yeah.
it to you.
Good evening. Ann Blodgett, 11 Brook Crossing. So I heard a lot about STRs, a lot of sort of circular conversation. You know, I think I've said for a few years in front of you guys that, yes, it does relate to housing. STRs erode housing. Wall Street Journal said it 3 to 5 years ago. So that's all good. I've sent you guys data. I don't think I think what I'd like to do, per John's suggestion, is send Tavis all my files on short-term rentals, including the town of Madison hired Granicus to do a baseline survey. Data is good for making decisions. So if you, I'm going to send you the link to their meeting about short-term rentals. It was actually the Board of Selectmen. It was incredibly clear. It was data-driven, and they had an outside source for credibility. So if that's okay, can I send it to Tavis per John's discussion? And a lot of the articles I've sent to Kathy, I'll re-forward. I had a question on conflict of interest when you were talking about it, because I come from the nonprofit world of late. Before that, the corporate world. And when we signed a conflict of interest, it was pretty stringent about potential pecuniary interest. I'm sort of wondering, I see in our town that there's a more loose interpretation of that. So I don't know what you guys have in front of you, but does that address it?
Generally, what the statute declares is that board members who believe they have a conflict of interest should recuse themselves. There's no requirement for them to recuse themselves, nor is there a mechanism for the board to require a member to recuse themselves.
I heard that, but I was asking potential pecuniary interest.
It's up to the board member to decide whether they can make an impartial decision.
That's a lot different than the rest of the world, I'll tell you that much. So
welcome to municipal.
Then I also had a question, tiny homes. So nobody's talked about tiny homes. Nobody's addressed or brought up, like, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but you can order a house from Amazon. What definition does that fit under?
Single family home.
It's not, okay. How about a tiny home?
What's a tiny home?
Usually it has mobile and it has
You're
a
not
chassis.
allowed to put it in a house that's on wheels.
Pardon me?
You cannot have a house on wheels.
Okay. So we have addressed tiny homes. That's encompassed in the current regs. Is that what you're telling me?
The building code does not allow you to have a house on wheels.
Okay. A chassis where wheels can be put on a flatbed?
Any home can be put on a flatbed. I don't know where the conversation's going.
Well, I think there's a house. I mean, I just think these are the new innovations, and you were talking about how the regulations actually discuss trailer parks. So maybe we need to encompass the newer forms of these habitats.
So that tiny just refers to a size.
Yes, and
Doesn't necessarily
they
have
started
we-
out being on a chassis, so people could, for instance, in California, people were leasing land and rolling in their house.
Yes, that's not allowed by building code.
Okay. How about that one over there that's built on a chassis?
It's on a permanent foundation.
Now. Okay.
Yeah, that's the requirement for a house.
Okay.
Every new home is now on a foundation. That's the way building code works.
Okay. All right. So if I order an Amazon house in a box.
And put it on a foundation and meet IRC, you'll be fine.
Okay. So that's what the current town
Correct.
regs say. Okay.
Well,
It would be
it's a
worthwhile to.
Isn't that a state regulation?
Well, all our zoning ordinance says is single-family detached.
Mm-hmm.
Single-family detached means a certain thing in the building code. So
Yeah.
as long as somebody constructs or erects or places something that meets the definition under IRC, it's a home. Whether it comes in on wheels or comes in on wheels and then is craned in, or it comes in on wheels and then the wheels are removed and is permanently attached to a foundation. I mean, any house in town can be put on a trailer and moved. some more easily than others. The premise of tiny homes is that you can drive a home into a lot, live in it, and then when you're done, you hook a truck up to it and you drive away. Those are not single-family homes, and those are not allowed under building code.
Okay.
So I think maybe what she's
Right.
trying to clarify is sometimes you have a traditional home that you tow behind your vehicle, and then there's the ones that people get creative and they create this wood, looks like a house, but it's towed on a trailer. And sometimes those are set up and they're made to be homes. But what you're saying is somebody has to have a lot.
You have to put it on a foundation.
So that, I'm glad to hear that that's the way you're enforcing it, because I didn't know from the conversation tonight. Thank you.
And is there any minimum size?
No.
This-
Wolfeboro
so
does
the-
not have a minimum house
Yeah,
size.
okay,
No.
all right.
Oh, but we have minimum lot sizes. We control things by lots, sizes of things by
Right.
lots, 30% coverage, for instance. You know, if we had lots of teeny tiny lots, it would be a concern, but I don't think we have them.
Yeah, further, we don't have minimum lot coverage, we only have maximum, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And on conservation cluster zoning, I guess it's also called?
It's not, it's conservation.
So
Subdivision.
was it ever called cluster, or is it?
That's under other people's ordinances in other towns.
Okay. So,
Maybe in the Wolfeboro, there was one once.
No, originally it was open space preservation option
yeah.
in the 70s.
So when
it's
you're
all these
talking
different
about this
words.
conservation housing thing, subdivision, it's not cluster.
What is cluster?
Cluster is a large tract of land clustering houses in a small area and surrounding them by conserved land,
That is the premise of the existing regulation, yes.
which is what I was understanding from your conversations. And I think I heard Vaughn say things like, well, it's not considered an attractive option. I suggest you go to Lincoln, Massachusetts and look at.
No, I meant that in attractive in a different way than what you're thinking. Not good looking. I meant it's not, nobody's doing them. It's not attractive to people who are trying.
There's no
we're
incentive
trying
to do it,
We're
right.
trying to promote
Well, you
these.
did say something like they're not particularly
Sorry,
appealing or
wrong
something. I don't
word.
know.
Well, they're not appealing to developers, it's not
Yeah,
financially
it's not
attractive.
attractive because it's not happening.
All right.
And
So-
that's why we're looking at the ordinance.
So I agree, but I will tell you, I lived in one.
No, I'm not complaining. I'm trying
So,
to help.
no, I'm
make
telling you, for the public, it didn't sound like it was an attractive option, but it is an extremely attractive option
I was the
to
one who
preserve
pushed
open
it.
spaces. So I know, but it came across that you,
Oh, sorry.
because now there are clusters in Lincoln, Mass. that have $3 million houses clustered together surrounded by open spaces. And I suggest you drive through and
Oh,
talk
I've
to.
designed them before.
Good, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, Harriman Hill is a cluster development, too. Harriman Hill is a cluster development, and it's all. Yes, right. Okay, anybody else? Okay, anyone have anything else they wanted to bring up?
Do we have minutes?
We do.
Yes, well, yes, we're getting to that.
Brad, did you raise your hand?
No, scratching.
I had one thing I wanted to bring up. I know I talked about the closed caption on the screen for people at home, so they can watch the words going across the screen. Is there any possibility that we could get that on Wolfeboro Community TV?
I think people have to turn on their closed captioning.
Nobody could hear in here tonight, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
I see a big space between people and their mics.
Yeah, board members need to be reminded to be right close to the mic or the,
I was going like this the whole time. Nobody saw me.
So that's what I hear. Again, the public can't hear us, so we need to do a better job. And
Get closer to your mic when you say these things.
Speak slowly.
Or we could go to the library, I guess, for our meetings.
That won't be any better, but John, I suggest you talk to Tim at WCTV about this stuff, because he knows a whole lot more about it than we do. You may get better answers as to why it's not working well, or what to do.
Well, yeah. If the public knew what to do, then maybe they could make it happen. But if we don't give them any insight on how to improve their capabilities of watching us and get informed, I mean, that's our job to do.
Yeah,
No,
but I think it's a
Julie
cost
meant-
issue too.
I think Julie meant that WCTV may be able to give us advice on how to improve our performance better.
That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay, where I was before, we finally came up with some mats that we put under the microphone. That seemed to have solved the problem back then, but, so maybe there are some suggestions.
It could be anywhere we choose to have it.
I think
Well-
people can hear the Board of Selectmen, so it's just training yourselves, maybe.
You have to be close to the mics, and you need to really speak into them. Even if you turn your head to talk to somebody down at the other end, it makes a big difference when you do that. Then you come back to the mic as far as everybody else hearing. So you're right. We need to be,
Well, John-
cognizant of the fact we need to really speak, within a few inches of the mics and speak slowly and clearly for the audience. So.
I mean, John's one of the ones that's really interested in this, so I think I'm nominating you to talk to Tim, maybe headsets. Ask him about these sorts of things, because you have more of a hearing problem than some of the rest of us do. So what's going to work best for you might help other people more.
No, I don't have a hearing problem. I'm hearing it from the crowd and from the people that said they can't hear us. And so I'm asking my planner and my chairman and my vice chairman if they can.
I will ask Timothy if he has any insights for the people listening at home on how to make it clearer.
And if it's anything other than having us speak closer to the mic.
Well, it's closer to the mic. It's pretending there isn't a microphone to rely upon, projecting your voice, using, I
know the guy upstairs, he's got every one of us mic'd differently. You don't
yes,
necessarily
but you have
notice it in here so much.
You have
but
to
on
remember the
screen
guy
you do.
upstairs is trying to balance the TV presentation,
Right.
which is completely different than
Right.
people in the room.
Another thing is the background noise. I know at our selectmen's meetings that Luke goes around before the meeting and shuts off all of the heaters here.
Yes, I love him for that.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't turn them back
So
on?
it's okay this time of year, but in the wintertime, it gets cool by the end of the meeting, so.
As somebody who is sitting on the other side of the table, I think the biggest problem has been with planning board members not speaking into the mic, which I think I probably did tonight, as well as turning my head sideways. But I think the biggest problem is people just aren't close to the mics.
What a wonderful case study.
Yeah.
If everybody holds the mic and then they just keep it with their head.
Okay.
I guess that shows us that we all have not taken public speaking courses. We're just plain Janes here.
Okay, let's go on to the minutes here of April 4th, 2023. Anybody have any corrections?
I'd just like to add 2 words, in different places, the same word, actually, A-R-E-R, looks like on the, I guess these should be numbered, 1, 2, 3rd page. Juan Dugan noted surprised in the Chamber of Commerce's position,
Yep, got it.
just add R. And then on,
The next page.
next page,
Got it.
et cetera.
Yep.
Did you get the, oh, okay.
Yes,
Anybody else?
it's adding the word "are" on page 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraph down on, or 7th line down on page 3 and third line down on page 4.
Okay. Anybody else have any suggestions?
I had a question on page 2, under C, in the second line. She noted the 10 housing survey.
10-year.
Oh, okay.
You get that?
Yep.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, entertain a motion to accept these minutes as amended.
So moved?
I'll second it. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion to adjourn,
So moved?
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, folks.